Everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric, and I got a really weird and strange episode for you guys this Friday, and this is because I am emulating Fighting Bujutsu or Fighting Wu-Shu 2nd via MAME. It does work, it is slow, but I want to talk about the game and I can't find an arcade board yet, so why the hell not? Before we get too far involved, though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link in the description below as well. But if you didn't see my 7 Games I Can't Find series, this is in relationship to that, because I have still not yet found a Fighting Bujutsu board. I am working on it. I'm chatting with a few people that have multiple broken boards to see if we can combine 1 to 2 working units together, but that still is in flux. But Fighting Bujutsu and the Konami Cobra arcade board do emulate thanks to Phil Bennett. Now, the emulation is not done. It is probably less than preliminary, and that's not a strike at all against what he's doing, but it's just going to be a little bit of a messy video. We're going through the options here. You got a decent amount of characters, including this guy right here, and I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that is just Joe Biden wearing a Fu Manchu beard with a little bit of a bigger eyebrow. But all jokes aside, you'll see here it's a 3-button play configuration, and the speed is normal and turbo. That turbo does not seem to change anything via emulation. But what I will say is Fighting Bujutsu is playable. We can take a look at what's going on and get a sense of what the game could be. Now, I will say that the input has a lot of lag in it, so it's really hard to get a sense of the flow and style of the game. But from what I am playing, it feels like it's trying to be a Virtua Fighter clone, and it's doing a pretty good job of that. Now, there really isn't much of a moveset published, and I am trying to play this with an arcade stick. But honestly, because of the lag, whatever I'm pulling off, I'm not quite sure how I'm doing it. And that is just down to the fact that the timings are way off, because the Konami Cobra board is an absolute mess of silicon. It has multiple PowerPC CPUs, both as a main and a sub-CPU, as well as for some of the graphics, and they're all slightly varying architectures. And then on the graphics side, this uses an IBM OpenGL workstation chipset on the video board. This has about as many chips on it as you would see on something like a Sega Hikaru board. It's a mess, and the fact that it's doing this well via MAME is super impressive for what it is. Although I will say I am using an i9-12900K, which is overclocked, so I have extra horsepower to throw at trying to just brute force this thing into working. So if you have a slower system, your mileage may vary very greatly. But you'll see here as well, there's definitely some lag in the game. It loves to slow down in spots, and I'm not sure exactly what is going on, but then again, I'm not a software engineer or a coder, so I'm really not sure how this could be improved. I know Phil Bennett does a lot of good work via MAME, and I'm sure he's working on trying to get this done at some point in time, because I know, just like me, he loves collecting rare arcade boards. But I just love what's happening here so far. I mean, Konami's not known for making great 3D fighting games, and I absolutely love Battle Trist on the 3DOM2, but the Cobra was the hardware they put out into the world to try to show that they could do the same thing as far as power and visuals were concerned as somebody like Sega. And this does look really good. I mean, I can't say that stylistically there's a ton going on in some of these stages, but the models look about up to par with something like Virtua Fighter 3, although it does crash ever so constantly. It seems like it loves to crash between stage 3 and stage 4, but it also crashes on the very end of the game. So unfortunately, as much as I wanted to show you an ending, I could not get it to not crash at that point in time. But it's fun to take a look at what the Cobra could have been doing. This arcade board made it for 1, maybe 2 games. It definitely is playing Fighting Bujutsu here, and there's a version of Racing Jam that was on the board as well, but there's so few examples of either of these games, it's hard to say if Racing Jam really released on the Cobra, or maybe it was just location tested, because it also exists on other Konami hardware, some of which that I do own, in a variable version of that game. So it's really hard to say what's happening and why it's happening, because a lot of the arcade boards from the mid to late 90s aren't as well detailed as some of the more 2D related stuff. So it's possible that Racing Jam never really came out on the Cobra. It's possible that it was location tested, or it's possible that it went to wide release and just didn't sell that well. You're never quite sure what you can say about these games. But I will say the soundtrack is good, but I'm going to let you listen to what I hear, because the audio emulation is slightly off as well, but it still sounds good for what's there. But go ahead and listen for like 35-45 seconds, and I'll come back and talk more about this exceedingly rare game. Enjoy!
Round 1, fight!
is exactly what you would expect for a soundtrack for a Eastern themed fighting game, and I really like what's there, even if obviously the sound emulation is having some issues. And I remember this dojo level. I've seen it somewhere before, and it took me like 1 or 2 seconds, not too long, to identify where I'd seen it, but apparently this is just a thing developers love to do, because in Samurai Showdown 64 you have a very similar dojo level with windows to the outside. I'm not saying anybody copied each other, these came out basically at the same time, but it's just a thing that happens. This footage here, I will say, I have sped up 10%, and we're getting into a closer flow of a playable game. Now obviously I'm not playing this, I've just sped the footage up, but it seems like the speed for Fighting Bujutsu is getting close to what it should be via emulation, and hopefully Phil does keep working at this and gets it more improved. Now on a rarity standpoint, what would I say this board is? It's probably like an 8 out of 10. I do know a few people that own them, I know a few people that own broken ones, and it's something that might come up for sale in the next year, and if it does, you damn well better believe I'm going to buy it, or you'll be in a bidding war with me for it, because I've got a huge appetite for rare 3D arcade games, especially made by Konami, and even I'm not 100% sure why I love them so much. I just, in fact, do. It's a weird thing, and even I'm not sure why I get into them so much. Obviously, I thought the 3DO M2 was rare, and I've got 11 of those in my closet now, and have preserved and released a bunch of content for it, so sometimes things are rare for years and then suddenly become kind of common for like 3 or 4 months and then go back into rarity again. It's a very strange thing. But I love this stage in particular because all of that background is fully 3D polygonal, where something like Battle Triss used 2D sprites and background layers because the power of that hardware wasn't as great. Now I wish they had used a little bit more of that power in all the stages, because some seem very basic, just with some walls that are flat 2D objects. Obviously they're polygonal, but they don't really have much depth whatsoever. This stage here really shows what the Cobra could do and keep up with something like Virtua Fighter 3, where we go to this stage. I mean, really, if you're going to be making this powerful of hardware, Konami, to compete with other people, why are you not having the art department do more with it? This isn't a review, it's not really a strike, it's just a thought that this just doesn't seem to be that exciting. Now obviously the models have a ton of polygons in them, and they look good for the time and age that this came out in 1997, but I wish they had just done more with the stages, because even looking at another one here, this is the final stage in the game. It looks like it's Angor Wat or something very similar to it. There's just not that much going on. Use the power and show me something cooler. I like the lighting effects and how we have these real-time shadows. Obviously the shadows layering isn't correct though, because they start going on top of things that they shouldn't. But unfortunately, when I wanted to show you the ending, again, I got the game to freeze. But that's just what happens when you're emulating games in MAME that are not finished or close to. You're going to have a lot of issues. And this is in no way, shape, or form a critique against the person who developed this driver for MAME. The fact that it runs whatsoever is extremely impressive, because like I said earlier, the Cobra is a complicated piece of hardware. It is probably too complicated. Konami loved overcomplicating their hardware, and they also loved doing bad heat management for the chips. Konami 3D boards love to bake themselves to death, and that's probably why this game is rarer. It's got a lot of hardware on it, and if the heat isn't dissipated well, the boards flex, and solder balls and joints start to crack, and things just don't work. Although I will say, in the emulation, when you're not controlling the character, things execute a little bit more smoothly. There's still definitely going to be some slowdown, but maybe the controller input is causing some of that lag in the processing as it kind of transcodes those PowerPC instruction sets over to something like x86. I'm not a computer scientist, I really don't know, I'm just taking a guess. But if you know where there's a Fighting Bujutsu board and it's working, let me know. Let's just say right off the top, $1,000 cash, I'll buy it. For real, I'm not kidding. I want to show everyone this game, running all the character captures, things like that. Leave me a comment down below and tell me it's dumb to emulate things that don't emulate. I'll have videos throughout the week, and maybe I'll talk about Fighting Bujutsu as a real board one day. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.